Well, hello, everyone. This is Wilson Cole. I'm president of Eli Global, Adams, Evans, and Ross and Backdoor Hires. And I am excited to do an interview with a lady that I have known at least for a decade and a half. And she needs absolutely no introduction. I know a lot of folks know Barbara Bruno, and a lot of them have been through your classes. Barbara Bruno, welcome to our podcast.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, outstanding. Now, Barb, I want to jump straight into it. I know you must have started when you were 16, but how did you get into recruiting and staffing?
I guess I got into it the way a lot of people do. I sort of fell into it. I was a single mom, and I was going through a divorce, and I wanted to change jobs. I was selling real estate, and the real estate rates were like in the 20%, so I couldn't sell real estate. And I went to employment agencies to get a sales job, and they kept testing my typing because I type over 100 words a minute because I play piano. Well, at the time, women were nurses, teachers, and secretaries. And so they kept trying to give me a secretarial job and said I couldn't sell. And so I just went home one evening and decided I'd gone to over 10 firms, and they all said the exact same thing to me. So I called Indianapolis, Indiana, and I said, how do I open one? So I literally opened one, never having worked at one, not having any clue what I was doing.
Okay. Well, okay. So you're doing the recruiting thing, and then at some point, I typically find either by inspiration or desperation, how did you get into the training aspect of it? Was that just your way to scale your business and realize you had a wonderful product afterwards? How did that work?
No, it was interesting. I was the state president of Illinois, and we were having a Midwest conference. We had 5 states there, and our speaker got sick and ended up in the hospital that morning. And so I got my board together and said, somebody's got to do the keynote while we figure out the rest of the day. We can't refund 800 people that traveled here. And so I remember drawing an X on a sheet of paper. And I said, whoever draws the X, you've got to go up there for 90 minutes while I'm figuring out how to put panels together, how to do the rest of the conference while you're, basically doing 90 minutes of a keynote. And they go, you go first. And I go, no, I'm president. I go last. And I got the X.
Oh my goodness.
And the funny thing was, Wilson, I went there and I had no intention of doing it again. I mean, I was in the bathroom physically ill at the thought of going on there and doing the program. So I didn't do his program. I asked him for 6 topics and said, we have 90 minutes together. Give me 6 topics. I'll talk 10 minutes on them and then take questions, because I knew it was about what I did, and so I figured I could pull that off. Well, then people started asking me to speak, but I was losing money like crazy for over a year because it was costing me money.
Sure.
Because, I worked a desk. And when you're traveling and most firms don't want to pay, most conferences want you to donate your time or they'll pay your travel expenses. And so I stopped training for 3 years. I just said, this is costing me too much money. I can't do this. And so then little by little, people kept asking me, and NAPS asked me to speak at their conference. And so I decided I was either going to stop doing it or had to turn it to a business. That's when I developed the web-based training, because just speaking, there is not enough money into it, not in our profession. You have to have products. You have to have something you can sell in the back of the room to justify that you're there. Because you lose, if you're at a conference, you lose the day before, you lose that whole day, and sometimes you lose part of the next day. So
absolutely,
I had to make a business out of it in order to keep doing it.
And so basically how you were able to do that to a large degree was replicate yourself with the technology. Is that?
Yes,
okay?
Absolutely.
Now, as far as that kind of segments in, I want to come back to technology, because you've been on the cutting edge, and you were doing these type of website recordings and the tutor package well before everybody else was. And I think everybody over the decade or so that has tried to mimic that. And I do want to come back to that, but you've trained a lot of recruiters. What do you think if you had to pick 3 attributes that make a good recruiter, what are those?
Number 1 has to be integrity, because this is a relationship building business. And if you don't have integrity, if you're just in it to make a quick buck, which you can do, your career is going to be short-lived. So I think it's got to be somebody that has the integrity to build strong relationships with both clients and candidates. Number 2 would be the best recruiters are great listeners.
Okay.
They don't talk as much. They listen. They key into what's important to the people that we serve, and that's why they do a great job. And third, I think you got to be able to think on your feet, because we have people on both ends. They change priorities. They change their minds. situations constantly hit us. And if you can't think on your feet, things are going to blow up constantly. So I would say that those three attributes would probably be the three that I would look for.
Okay, so let's say somebody brand new is coming into the industry,
Mm-hmm.
or they've been in just for a very short period of time. What would be the three pieces of advice that you'd give to them? Is how do you go from just that survival to being able to thrive? What would those three pieces of advice be?
The first thing would be is their job, and I think when people enter our profession, they go through training programs and they're all confused about what their job is. They think they're supposed to interview candidates or write orders or get contracts, when in essence, our job very simply is to get candidates in front of hiring authorities. And so if I'm talking to a new person, what I tell them is your job is to book sendouts. A sendout to me is a meeting between a candidate and a client, first interview. And so every day when you're doing your plan at night, you know, how do I book a send out tomorrow? How do I get a first interview going? Because to have that first interview, well, then you've got to have the candidate, you've got to have a viable order.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do nothing more than constantly increase the number of send outs they book every month, they will elevate their production because everybody has a send out to fill or send out to placement ratio. And
Okay.
so, you know, once they're doing this 3 to 6 months, they know that ratio. And if they say the ratio is 5 to 1, if they send 5 more people out, they make another placement. And
Okay.
so, you know, you've got to know your numbers, but I would tell them to focus on send outs. And the other thing is they've got a plan. You know, people told me to plan for years and I didn't do it, Wilson. And I was mediocre at best for years. And finally, I kept telling them, you don't work at a recruiting firm. You don't understand. We can't plan. Every phone call can change where I'm going. And they go, that's an excuse. And so finally, I embraced it from one of my coaches and I decided to start planning. And so what I would tell a new person is every day, write down the 6 priorities you have closest to the money for the following day and 10 calls. And then the following month, you know, 6 things closest to the money and 20 calls until you get to the point where you're handling the 6 priorities you have every day and you commit to doing those things. So nothing slips through the cracks. You know what's closest to the money. And then you start planning all your outgoing calls. Most recruiters are controlled by their incoming calls. They're almost, technology has really changed the profession in a lot of good ways, but people are posting and praying. They're waiting for people to call them. They're sending in-mail on in LinkedIn and they think that's recruiting. You know, so I think a lot of it is planning outgoing calls and being very proactive and focus on increasing that send out number.
Well, you know, that it's interesting because we, of course, over on our businesses, we use the phone quite a bit. But
Mhm.
even I have to admit, the phone has changed. Now, in some ways, it's better than it was years ago, and where you have that connection and you're going to pick up the phone and talk directly to them. For prospecting, it's still effective, but it has changed. What do you see as far as, you know, the old time, you know, where you make 100 calls, you get 3 leads, and one of them turns into a job order? Or whatever the dynamics for whoever's company that is. How do you see the phone playing right now, and how do you see the different technology working with those phone calls? What, you know?
Well, I've never believed in telling somebody to make 50 phone calls. I think that's the wrong advice. I love when managers are upset with somebody and they go make more calls. Well, if the person's made 20 calls and they got no results, if they make 50 more of the same calls, it's not the number of calls, it's what they're saying. And so
Okay.
for me, you've got to know what results do you need every day. If I have to do 3 interviews a day, how many candidates do I have to talk to book 3 interviews a day? So I'm going to make as many calls as I have to make to book the 3 interviews. But what you're facing now is no one is answering their phones. They're all hiding behind technology. LinkedIn is very worried. I do training for LinkedIn Learning. And so I'm in an insider group with LinkedIn, and they're worried that the in-mails are not being opened anymore because people don't like unsolicited templated in-mails where they know somebody's sending it to 50 people. They don't like to be pitched a job. You know, they want you to talk about what is their next career move. So I think we have to change the voicemails we leave. Most voicemails that recruiters leave is, hi, I have a job. I saw your LinkedIn profile. I think you're perfect. Call me back. So in essence, I'm a salesperson. I want to sell to you. Call me back. And
Okay.
they get all upset when they have 2% callbacks. So I'm teaching a much different voicemail to leave. I'm teaching much different in-mails to send. They've got to be personalized. And the voicemail I use, and I'll give it to you, it's like, hi, my name is Barbara Bruno. Someone suggested we talk. Do me a favor, Wilson, when you call me back, tell whoever answers the line to interrupt me no matter what I'm doing, because I don't want to miss your call. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Again, it's Barbara Bruno. I give my number again. You have a great day. Thanks.
That's very good.
Yeah, they return that because number one, you said someone suggested we talk, and they almost always never ask who suggested. But if they do, I'll say I'm always asking people who was the best engineer from your last place of employment, or if somebody gave their name, I'll use the name. When I say to interrupt me, no matter what I'm doing, you make the person feel important. They're curious, and so they call you back. So that I've taught that to hundreds of recruiters, and it has roughly a 65% callback, where the voicemail I said at the beginning, selling a job, has 2%.
I mean, and I find it interesting because I agree with you 100%. You, in essence, instead of it being all about you, it becomes all about them. Yes. To where it elevates their status and stature. So that's neat. Now, I know that, everybody has their specialties. How much of a niche, or I mean, should recruiters go into a niche? What are your overall views on finding a niche and working that niche?
Right. I help brand new people that are going into the business, and I help people that are very experienced. I want to give you an example. I guess the best way to answer that is I believe you should be niched. I believe you should be niched within your niche. I'm going to give you an example of one of my clients. He was a TSA member, and he came to me 5 years ago and said, I want to get from 10 million to 20 million because I want to sell. I've tried for 7 years. I've done everything. I've changed my management team. I changed my comp plan. I added a new niche. I've let some people go virtual. He said, Barbara, I go between 9 million and 11 million, and I need to be to 20 million to sell. Can you help me? And I said, I don't know. I don't know your business, but how about you sign up for 3 consulting calls and let's see. So the very first call I had with him, I sent him a questionnaire, and I noticed when I asked him, how many positions do you work on? He said 59. So when my first call with him, I said, you're placing 59. I think you might write 59 titles. Maybe you work with VMS clients, but you can't possibly be filling 59. He goes, yes, we are. I checked, and my team told me that we work on 59 titles. And I said, I'll bet I will give you an hour free consulting if you come back and tell me that 75% of your business is less than 10 titles. And he goes, you're wrong. So 2 weeks later, he came back and he goes, you're not going to believe this. And I go, what? He goes, Barb, 82% of our sales are 6 titles. And I said, how many of those 6 titles are you filling? He said, 100%. It's 82% of my business. I said, no, you're not, because you're working 59 titles. He came back a day later and he goes, oh my God, we're filling 21%. So 82% of his revenue were 6 titles, and he was only filling a little over 20% of those titles. So we redid everything. We redid his marketing, his branding, his website, everything. And he decided to really focus on those 6 titles. And he went out there and they only wrote business for the 6 titles. They pipelined candidates in advance. He's at 51 million as of last month, because I've been at a conference. And now he wants to get to 60 million by 2022. And so you're talking about how do you up at 10 more million. But if you're not niched and not focused, then you've got all these orders coming in, and by the time you go out there and try to recruit, somebody else fills them. So you've got to know who you are. Yeah. And tell people 6 to 10 titles max, pipeline them in advance, because technology has forced us not only to get the best candidates, but get them faster than our competition. You can't do that. When I went into this, I was a full service general employment agency. Okay. And I placed a secretary one day and a pharmacist the next, and an engineer the next, and it was a nightmare. And I almost lost my house because you couldn't do it. Sure. And so, but now with technology, they go to your LinkedIn profile and see if there's recommendations from people like them. Mm-hmm. Clients go there, they want to see you're dealing with clients just like them. Sure. Exposed by social media. So you've got to know who you are. You've got to be niche. All the big billers that I coach are niched. Every one of them, 100% of them.
Well, I think Jay Abrahams once told me he says, specialists will always make more than the general practitioners. And he's absolutely right. But I find it amusing. You trained him so well that he grew beyond, 3 times beyond what he was targeting for, and realized the business was too valuable to sell, and he's still in it past that.
Absolutely.
So now, Barb, we talked about the young person coming in. Now, let's say that you have somebody that's been doing this for 20 years and they know everything. And to me, that is where the troubles really start. But what advice would you give that 20-year recruiter that's sitting around saying, I know everything, But if I didn't know everything, what would that advice be to them?
What I do with really experienced recruiters is I ask them where they think they need help. And what I'm finding is even a lot of the really experienced recruiters have gotten very reactive. They've bought into some technology, but they're always looking to their owners to buy the next tool, the next thing that's going to be the end all be all. I need more resources. I need more candidate resources. They forget that they're the resource. And you've got the greatest shift going on. The people that have been out there 20 years have never seen what's going on right now. And a lot of those very tenured people have kind of written off the millennials. They blame everything on the millennials. Well, the millennials are now 50% of the workforce. In 5 years, they're going to be 75% of the workforce.
Yep.
And so what I tell them is you've got to change your approach. You've got to change the way you go out there. Many of your clients are now millennials, and they don't want to hear, the editorial. They want the cliff notes.
Okay.
So I think the tenured people have to realize the greatest shift is going on. Plus, companies, according to LinkedIn, companies are spending $2.5 billion a year with a B on job board ads and website postings and that. 2.5 billion. And then they call us and then we give them the exact same candidates they got from their job board ad. Or what they say is, I'm doing 50% of my speaking now to our end users. I'm speaking to a lot of corporate audiences, manufacturing audiences on purpose to show them why they should use us. Well, what they say to me is anybody that calls them, they go, if we run a job board ad and we get 20 recruiters to call us, we write their name down because we're never going to use them. Why don't they target us before we ran a job board ad, saying that why they wanted to do business with us, not being lazy. They see a job board ad, I just spent $6,000. I don't want to hear from a recruiter.
Yeah.
So I think that the tenured people have to realize this shift is going on. And a lot of the things that we did 10 years ago, it's kind of a high-tech, high-touch approach. We were so high-touch because there was no technology.
Sure.
We've gotten so high-tech, and it's still a relationship-building business, but they have to realize that there's a shift going on, and they have to shift the way they do their business. I've been in studios all summer putting all my training on video, and I'm trying to launch it this next year because nobody wants to read anymore.
Yeah.
So you got to go along with your audience.
Yeah. No, I mean, the reason that we're now doing these podcasts is specifically
right.
for that reason. Now, one of the subjects that, of course, everybody would expect their collection guy to talk about is recession. And I know nobody is like, oh, Wilson, we were doing so good. Why bring up a bad subject? But I know as well as you do, you've ridden out those storms before. I think I'm at 3 or 4. You're in that same number, maybe a few more in the recruiting industry. So what does somebody need to be doing right now? Because whether it's in 6 months or in 6 years, a recession's going to hit. What do they need to be doing right now to try to recession-proof that business?
They can't have one client represent more than 10% of their income.
Okay.
Biggest mistake, 2008 to 2010, I had many companies call me like going, oh my God, I'm losing my business. And in almost every instance, they made 75% of their revenue from less than 5 clients. When those 5 clients quit hiring, they were dead in the water. So you have to be, you have to have at least a client base of 30 clients, 10 key accounts and 20 backups. And I believe you have to have a blended business. I believe you have to do both direct and contract, because during recessions, sometimes direct goes down, contract goes up, and vice versa. They've both been up now for 3.5 years. I've never seen this long. Contract is just as strong as direct right now. Direct is just as strong as contract. But you've got to learn both of those so that when a recession does hit, if one goes up or down, you're still okay. And you've got a broad enough client base. And one more thing, you can't be a vendor. So many times they view us as one of many. And so I think you go from vendor to trusted advisor to consultant. And then you got to make your client your friend. You've got to take them to dinner. You've got to know their kids. You've got to know their wedding anniversary. You've got to become part of their life. Because if a recession hits them, they can only use one resource. And you've become the best listener in their life. You're their sounding board. You're the one that knows everything about them. They'll still do business with you. So if you're a vendor, if you're only communicating with email and texting, you're dead in the water. If you're their friend and you're their sounding board, and you listen to understand where they're coming from, you don't give them solutions or judge them, they'll never want to lose you. So you got to position yourself differently with clients. Also, you got to make sure you got multiple contacts in every company, because our clients are changing more than ever. And so often you've got one contact, they leave, and now you lose the client. Sure. So that's another way to recession-proof, have 2 to 3 contacts at every company.
Yeah, that is really good news, and that is something that we learned the hard way, because with Adams, Evans, and Ross over on the collection side, we always see a little bit of a surge on the front side of a recession, which is actually good for us on the front side. That last one was so weird. Towards the end, we saw about a 2% contraction, which is the first time that had happened. And part of that, and it probably took us about a year or two to get out of there, because we found companies being bought by other companies. And the fact that we probably weren't in contact with them as much, we didn't know that happened. So the new people came in and things on those lines. I think having multiple contacts, and that is something that we do try to do, where we have the point of contact and then maybe a couple of backups. I think that's brilliant brilliant advice, and I can tell you that's one that I'm going to write down and share with our sales folks here in the next week's meeting. Now,
you know what else, Wilson? One more thing I want to add to that. I'm sorry to interrupt you. One more thing that I think is very important. We can't only talk to our clients when we're making money.
Yeah.
I was guilty of that for years. I only talked to my clients when we were working on deals, because I had other clients I was busy working on at other times. And then I realized, no. So I provide free training for all of my clients once a month. We do webinars. We send them an article of interest with updates on our most placeable candidates once a month. We keep our name in front of them often, and we're communicating. We're giving them trends. We're letting them know what's going on, even when we're not making money from them. Because what I hear from them often is they think we're just a paycheck. Mm-hmm. The people that are out there working as contractors know they're earning money for us every hour they work. And clients, if they only hear from us when we're making money on them, they're not going to keep us informed. So it's positioning ourselves, again, as that wealth of information, that workplace expert, even when I'm not making money off of you.
No, I mean, I agree with you. And I think if I guess how I would internalize that is that you're giving value to their clients, even when they're not necessarily writing a check for it every single month. So
absolutely.
I understand and respect that. Now, what do you see as the biggest opportunity over the next 2 to 5 years?
Well, there was a number that came out on LinkedIn again, because I'm in that insider group. I have their big data, so I quote them a lot. They were saying that by 2030, the global talent shortage could reach 85 million. Okay, so that's going to cause companies to lose trillions in lost economic opportunities. So we're positioned in the right place at the right time in history. You've got the greatest shift. You've got the baby boomers retiring that make great contractors, by the way. You've got the millennials taking over, and there's not enough of them. And you've got this global shortage of talent. And countries like China, why are all the foreign governments in our colleges right now giving these lucrative paid internships to juniors and seniors? I'm by Purdue University, which is one of the top engineering schools in the world. And I've got a friend who's a professor there, and he said they're starting to pay interns in their sophomore year. These other governments are coming in, and they'll offer them an intern between their sophomore and junior year. They'll pay their tuition junior and senior year, but then they have to work for them 3 years after graduation. And in the summers, they're flying them to their countries and giving them a very lucrative paid internship in the summers. Well, that's because countries like China that have controlled population, they're going to be in the worst shape. According to all the statistics, the only country that's going to have enough people in 2030 is India. They're the only country that'll have enough people.
Wow, that is interesting. That I did not know that. That is an interesting side fact, and I do agree with you. I think that as you see that workforce kind of shrink, it supply and demand. So that is neat. Now, Barb, I know you've got a book coming out. You're in the process at this point of going through the editing. It's written and things on those lines. So it's a little way out. By the time somebody's watching this, it may be ready to buy off the shelf. But tell us a little bit about the book, and if somebody wanted it now or to put in, I guess, a pre-order or to get on your notice, how would they go about getting in touch with you? And tell me about the book.
Right. The book, I had a publishing company call me from the UK, and they asked me if I could write a book about recruiting that wasn't like any other book about recruiting. And I went, okay, do you have an idea of what you want me to do? And they said, no, we want to see it from your vantage point. You've been doing this for years. What could you go out there? Because they distribute the books to school colleges. They said if a college wanted to start a course on recruiting, we want this book to be their handbook. If I'm a corporate recruiter and don't know what I'm doing, I want to use this book. If I'm working for a staffing and recruiting firm, I want, so it was kind of a broad, but they wouldn't give me a topic. So I came back with high tech, high touch recruiting. And the book is basically based on how we have to communicate differently, how we have to approach people differently, how we have to, like, I'm teaching people now to do performance-based requisitions rather than skill-based, because it isn't working. It's screening too many people out, and so it's showing how technology has changed things, but it's showing us how to still get those relationships. And the book also, even though I don't have a chapter that says how to recession-proof your business, but if you follow the advice in the High Tech, High Touch book, it's showing you how to recession-proof what you do. And it won't be out until September of 2020.
Okay.
When they're supposed to launch it. And they're going to launch it worldwide, I guess. Because they asked me if they could put it in different languages and all kinds of crazy things. I'm like, sure. But I'm still writing it.
Okay.
And I don't know that they're taking pre-orders yet. I don't have information to take pre-orders, but if anybody contacted my office, obviously we have all different kinds of training things, so we could put their name on a list if they wanted to be on a list to be contacted, when the book launches.
Well, that segues into my next question is, because a lot of people are sitting here listening saying, man, I wish I would have known what Barb's talking about 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I want to work and learn those strategies. If one of our listeners wanted to connect and get your training, how would they go about right now signing up for your training?
Right. What we try to do is we try to customize training. We try to be the best listener in their life. So first of all, we like to talk to people and find out, what are they trying to solve? Like, do they need a web-based course? Do they need customized web? Like, what do they need? Is it an owner that wants to sell and only does direct hire and realizes that he can't sell because he doesn't do contract? So we talk to each person. Probably the best thing is to call my office. I've got a team of people that work for my training company that can take their call. That number is 219-663-9609. I'm going to repeat that. 219-663-9609, or they can go to our website that is goodasgoldtraining.com. So it's goldtraining.com. Either way.
Well, I know a lot of our clients have used your training and absolutely swear to it. And whenever someone, after you speak at the different conferences, I know we see each other on the circuit as I'm there typically as a vendor, and everybody that walks out of these conferences, you hear them talking saying, wow, she is really good. So if you haven't seen Barb in person, you need to see her at one of the conferences. In the training, I can attest. I've had plenty of clients that have gone through the training and they swear by it. Well, Barb, I appreciate you joining me on this issue of our podcast, and I wish you luck with the book. And when it does come out and you have those dates, shoot me an email, because I'd love to send it out to our client. Plus, I'd like to get a copy of it myself, because I've never recruited, have no desire to recruit, but the fundamentals that you're talking about transcend the technical aspect. It's more of a philosophy. So certainly thank you for sharing that with us today.
And I wanted to add one last thing, and I know you didn't ask me to do this, but I've known your company for years, Adams, Evans, and Ross. And for those of you that are listening to this, I don't give recommendations too much for other companies unless I believe in them. I wouldn't have done this podcast for Wilson if I didn't believe in him, because I don't do that. I have companies call me all the time, offering me all kinds of money to promote their products, and I won't do it. So me doing this podcast with you is basically my recommendation for your services as well. So you've got a great name in the industry, and if anybody's contemplating your services that you offer as well, Wilson, I would highly recommend you.
Well, thank you kindly, and that was very kind and certainly appreciated. And I am sure I will see you on the spring as we all hit the road doing what we do.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity to do this.
Thank you, Barb. Bye-bye.
Bye.